welcome to Art in the Digital World. I'm your host, Brandon Town. This is a show where we'll be talking about artists who use digital mediums like digital cameras, computers, stuff like that, and other general artist type stuff. And this week we have Susan, who's a graphic artist and web designer and other things too, many things, huh?
Yeah.
Welcome, Susan. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
I've worked with you on some projects before, so this will be kind of a fun thing to talk to you about this stuff. Tell me what it is that you do, actually, or all of what you do.
Well, I consider myself a web designer and graphic artist, as you said, and I consider myself to be a generalist. So I use a lot of the different Adobe products. And because I use a lot of different programs, I'm probably not as proficient as someone that strictly uses Photoshop or strictly uses Illustrator or does, a lot of work in one medium. So I think that for my personality, I use all the programs. I like doing it that way. I use them in my web design, and I am not the kind of person that would work well in a big production studio where maybe all you do all day long is just animate a figure that somebody else has built. I like to do the project from start to finish, and that kind of limits me commercially because most people who want to hire you are going to hire you and put you in a little slot, and I don't do well in that environment, so I am freelance for that reason.
I understand. I kind of do the same thing with what I do. It's like when I do video production, I'm shooting, I'm writing, I'm editing, I'm doing the DVDs and everything. So I know how that is. Do you have a specific thing that you're kind of, that is your favorite thing to do? Not something that you would want to do all the time, like you're saying, but something that you really enjoy to do of all the different things that you do.
Well, the thing that I really enjoy and won't let myself do right now is I really enjoy 3D animation. And the reason I won't let myself do it is because I will sit down at the computer and say, all right, you got an hour. And then you have to do something that will make you some money. And 8 hours later, I'm still playing in Maya, and I'm going, well, that didn't help pay the mortgage, did it? So until I get good enough at Maya that I could actually, make a living doing something like that, I spend most of my time in Photoshop. I spend most of my time working with websites, and I enjoy that. When I first decided to go back to school, which was about 7 years ago at this point, I decided to get a degree in graphic arts, actually a certificate. And the first thing I did is I took a Flash class. And unbeknownst to me, everybody pretty much before you take Flash has learned how to use Photoshop or Illustrator or something like that. And so suddenly I'm in this class and I'm supposed to make designs and draw things on the computer. And oh my goodness, the stuff that I was turning in looked like a 3-year-old had done it. Because I had no idea how to use Photoshop. I hated it. I just hated that program. There was nothing intuitive to me about it. Illustrator the same way. So I was like kind of drowning. I even got a message from my instructor telling me how to work on my images. The animation and the Flash was fine. So I kind of dove into the deep end of the ocean on that one. And then I took a Dreamweaver class, and I was kind of stuck in the same position, but it just happened to be that's how those classes fell. So then I realized that I really needed to get Photoshop, and I needed to get Illustrator and some art programs, some graphic art programs, so that I could produce the images that I needed for the websites. So I started out, I did Illustrator, and I really love Illustrator, and I still hated Photoshop because I didn't understand it. And so once I got that class done, I did go into Photoshop, and I started learning how to use that. Still wasn't my favorite program, but now a few years later, I really feel like there's a place in my life for Photoshop, and there's a place in my life for Illustrator. I've played a little bit with After Effects, which is fun. And so those 3 programs, I haven't learned how to use Premiere yet. I'm pretty much an Adobe person. The reason I like Adobe is because they've made all those programs pretty much compatible with each other, so it's easy to pull something from Photoshop and put it in Illustrator, or something from Illustrator, put it in Photoshop to tweak it a little bit differently. When I'm using photos, I pretty much use Photoshop. When I want to do drawing like these glasses, then I go to Illustrator. So I'm getting much more proficient in a variety of programs, and it's making my life a whole lot easier and a lot more fun.
Do you think it's important for a digital artist or someone in digital media to know different programs like you do, even if they do a specialized field? Do you think it's important for them to know the different programs?
I think it's very beneficial to know some of the different programs, because there's just certain things that work better in one program than they do in the other. And I think it gives you a lot more options of how you can accomplish something. Maybe you have a vision that isn't quite working out with just one program, but you could go and tweak it in a different program and then combine them and bring your whole vision out together. One of the things that I found when we work with Maya is I also needed to know After Effects, because when you pull all your scenes out of Maya, we'd throw them in After Effects, and that would actually make the movie. And then there'd be certain things that you might want to add the sound, and so we used After Effects to add sound to our movies. So yeah, I think it's important. I don't think it's critical in like, if you don't know all this stuff, you can't do anything. But I think for me, it's really broadened my horizons, and really it makes learning new programs as they come out a lot easier, because the interfaces tend to be somewhat similar, and a lot of the knowledge you take from one program to another. So yes.
Do you have any experiences with standards or incompatibility? Like if you do work with someone or work with something and you find that you have to take a little extra effort to make it work because you have learned one program and maybe there's a different, your client or something uses a different program or anything like that?
I haven't really run into that problem. The place I have run into that is with these glasses. As we were talking earlier, is the printer, for some reason, I have a certain size, which is like 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches or something to work with, and yet this glass is the only one that they've actually put the image on there in the size that it was intended. And as you can see, there's plenty of room on the glass, so it isn't an equipment problem or a limitation on their end. It's just apparently whoever is operating the equipment that day. This guy I like. I got to find out who he is so that this year when we do the glasses, I can get that person to do my image the way it was set up to be, and not shrink it down like they did on the other two glasses.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about this project and what these are?
Okay. These glasses were designed for the Brewfest that happens at Bear Valley every spring. This spring it's going to be April 13th, which is easy to remember because it's 2013. A lot of the microbreweries are up there on this day. They have this Brewfest. There's always a jazz band. Their microbreweries come up and they serve beer. It's a benefit that benefits Sierra Hope. And what we do is we have these glasses and everybody gets to they get a certain number of tickets and they get a taste of, you can go run around anyway and taste a whole bunch of different kinds of beers. That's the deal. So a few years ago, I offered to design these glasses, and this was the first year. So that was my first one. And the next year, I just decided to keep on going, have our little skier guy, in the spirit of the pond skimming and the beer, he is now diving into the beer. And then, of course, last year, he's floating on the beer. So since this is Bear Valley this year.
I like the one where he's floating in the beer.
He's a pretty happy camper right there, yeah.
It's like, I just did a really cool jump, now I'm just going to relax.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I don't think the pond skimmers would mind quite so much when they don't get to the other side and they hit that water if it were really beer. So anyway, yeah, and this year, since it's Bear Valley, this year there's going to be a bear in the cup, and he's going to have kind of dunked that poor little skier. All you're going to see is the bear and the skis and probably a little bit of the skier.
When you first came up with these, did you know you were going to do a series like that? Yeah.
No, I just wanted to bring the themes of skiing and beer together, and so that's why I came up with the little skier, and he's kind of aimed at the beer glass, and if he followed along, he'd do what he did. He ended up in it.
I guess it kind of makes a collector's thing too, like you have the whole series of the different ones. So
Actually, that's something I'm kind of proud of, because last year people started asking, we usually have a few extra glasses left from the previous year, so we'll use the old ones and we'll go to the new ones. And now people ask for the new one. They go, no, I don't want last year's, I want this year's. So it has. It's really kind of taken on a life of its own. And so as an artist, it's pretty satisfying to know.
That's cool.
People.
Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. We talked a little bit about school. Tell me about the schooling that you're going through, or that are you still in school? I forget.
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. So
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that and how that program works.
Okay, well, I will preface this by saying that I have a 4-year degree in business, and I feel like it's just such a general degree that I don't have any marketable skills. I didn't like what I was doing. I was really burned out on sales, and I wanted to get into web design. And absolutely not having any idea of what I should do to get into web design, I decided I'd go to MJC and get a certificate in computer graphics, because they didn't actually have a web design course. I decided that since I had a good basic degree, that there really was no reason to go back and try to get a graphic art degree. So I went with the certificate, and I started just taking a couple classes a semester. I now have the classes for a computer graphics degree, and there's just so much more to learn. Things keep changing all the time, so this semester I switched over to Columbia. I'm going to take a class in video production for the web, and I'm also taking a multimedia presentation class, which is pretty much using PowerPoint, which I think that I can benefit small businesses by offering them an array of services. So I could do your website for you, I can do graphic arts for you if you need your business cards, your letterhead, anything like that designed. And if you're a small business who has an opportunity to go after, say, a big client, then maybe you need somebody that can put a professional presentation together for you that has those skills, but you don't need that person all the time. You just need it for this one big presentation. So that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to be able to offer my clients. As far as the web design goes, way back in the olden days, there was very limited graphics on the web. So everything was text. There just wasn't the connection speed, there wasn't the processing speed for computers to allow for a lot of images, because it'd take 10 years before an image would load. Now everything's so fast. It's incredible. So it's really, now websites are very image-laden and very image-driven. And then the next step beyond that is now everybody's looking to video. So as people change and as the needs change and the market changes, I keep going to school, and I'll probably die going to school.
Well, maybe you can tell me a little bit about this project, or maybe some other projects. Like, what's your workflow whenever you do something like a graphic? Like, where does it start, and kind of how do you take from your concept to get your concept to the final project?
Well, with these glasses, what I did is I actually searched the web for some different ski pictures. And with Illustrator, you can put an image on the screen, and you can kind of almost trace it. And so I can't draw to save my life, but I can take a picture and turn it into kind of a line drawing. So if you saw the pictures I started out with these, you'd go, well, you didn't trace them. Well, I kind of traced them and I kind of didn't. So, maybe I shouldn't confess to that, I don't know, but that's how I do it. But I do tend to take a lot, I look at different images, I kind of think about where I want to go with it. And the first one was pretty much strictly looking at something and going, yeah, that looks good, and I kind of, reproduced it, but in a line style. The next year, I took my basic image and it was more my own creativity. I still took a picture and was looking at it and, referencing it to get the skier to look like I wanted him to look, but it was a lot more of my creativity and my interpretation at that point. And then this last year, you know what? I couldn't find a picture of somebody swimming in a vat of beer, so this was all me.
That's really great. I think that the thing you said about tracing, that's fine. Whatever you can do to make a really cool product, and if you can, I know that a lot of media stuff these days too. It's like taking multiple images and putting things together. So, it's a really cool concept. Tell me a little bit about like Illustrator, kind of what that program is for our viewers, and like how it works with digital media, like how you use it.
Well, for me, if I want to do something like this where it's kind of a drawing or maybe a pattern, I like Illustrator because to me it's just easier. It's kind of set up for that. It's kind of set up as a drawing program. So you can, say, draw a circle and make a perfect circle, which I could never do by hand. You can do a straight line, which, they always say measure twice, cut once. Well, I'm the kind of person that could measure 14 times and I'd still have to cut 3 times. So for me, this really fills in my deficiency of actually being able to draw. But I really like it for this sort of thing. I like it for text. I like it for anything that you want to be able to scale. With Photoshop, unfortunately, if you try to scale something, it tends to pixelate. With the vector drawing, which this is vector drawing, there's scalability. So I can give you an example in that these were all designed in a 2-inch by 2-inch format. So today, when I wanted to put them out,
this one.
this is like 300 times the original
Right.
size.
Right.
And yet you didn't lose any resolution.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that's really great about Illustrator is you can take one image and it's very scalable. So if you wanted to turn that into a billboard, you would still not lose the sharpness of the vector drawing. So it's real scalable, and I like that aspect of it. I don't know. I guess that's kind of how I split it out, is if I want to do more of a drawing type image, I use this. If I'm working with photos, then I use Photoshop. And I'm sorry I didn't bring. I did in Photoshop a picture of a friend's son who loves wrestling. He loves that worldwide wrestling stuff. So I had taken a picture of a wrestling. I take him to the wrestling matches, and I stuck his head on a wrestler. And now that's something you have to do in Photoshop. You just simply could not do it in Illustrator.
Right.
So
Right.
anyway,
Well, to Photoshop too, you have a couple images here, but we can show this one for now. And tell us a little bit about how you use Photoshop to create an image like this.
Well, this particular image is from 2 different photos. One is the photo was the peacock that you see here. The other was another peacock that I took a close-up of. So to create this image, first of all, I took this background, kind of the big feathers, and I darkened them, and I put a texture on them, and I might have done some other things, I don't remember. But I tweaked it a little bit, so it's not really the true color or the true texture of the feathers. And then I took the other picture and I just simply cut this guy out and stuck him in the background. So Photoshop works with layers, and you can put different pieces of the picture on different layers. So that's how this got created. And then I took this actually is some weeds that was in the background, and it's a process called you plasticize it. So this is just, I didn't want the actual plants showing. I wanted to stylize them a little bit, so I plasticized them, and I think I also kind of sharpened them up and maybe changed the colors a little bit. So that was the
Photoshop
process for that.
definitely has a lot more tools for tweaking images for photos in a way. I mean, I guess that's why they call it Photoshop.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You could not do that in Illustrator.
But the Adobe stuff works. They all work, like you said earlier. They all work really well together. Like what's an example maybe where you would use Photoshop and Illustrator to create some kind of product? Do you have any experience with that or any stories about that?
I do. Well, for one story is that when I did the original glass design, I did it in Illustrator, and for whatever reason, the printer at that year decided he wanted it as a 300 DPI PDF. And for some reason, I could not get Illustrator to give him the right 300 DPI because I'd sent the file off. It was supposed to be 300. I'd get it back. No, it wasn't 300. So I put it in Photoshop and redid the PDF. And interesting enough, an Illustrator PDF is not exactly like an Adobe Photoshop PDF. So the PDF in the Photoshop actually was able to retain the 300 DPI that we needed for the printing. So that's one thing. The other thing is I just like working with text in Illustrator better than the text in Photoshop, and I'm not quite sure why. But I have taken different pieces, like of a logo, for example, that I created in Illustrator and put it on an image that I put in Photoshop. And for some reason, it just works out better for me that way, to take the text, take it out of Photoshop or Illustrator, and put it into Photoshop. And I'm not sure why.
Computers are fun that way.
They are. They are.
Tell me a little bit about what's your experience with working in a digital medium and anything that's like an analog, medium, like going from, digital to printing, what kind of stuff have you done that's not digital?
Well, I've done stained glass work. That's certainly not digital. I would like to get back into that if I ever get my garage cleaned up. Like I said, I can't draw to save my life, so that's kind of by the wayside. So I think really the stained glass, more three-dimensional things. I'm working on a chair for charities right now, and that's going to be, it's all found objects. I found the chair at the dump, thank you. And I'm doing some macrame with twine that I got off a hay bale, so it's kind of a fun project. So I would say in the non-digital arena, for me, it's more three-dimensional projects that I do. So the stained glass, of course, is kind of flat, but it's still really a three-dimensional product as opposed to something digital like this. It's two-dimensional.
Do you find that your experience working with non-digital stuff crosses over with your digital design type things?
I think so, more so in Maya than in other programs, because you get that whole round, the whole 360-degree view with Maya. You can turn things around, so you have to know what they look like on the whole 360 degrees. Other than that, I guess color choices, things like that. I'm finding that I don't like 3D movies because they're not solid enough. I just went to a movie, the last 007 movie, and I just happened to, I was looking at it and and I went, it just seems more solid than the 3D. So even though I loved Avatar in 3D, I'm just kind of right now going, if I have a choice between a 3D movie and a 2D movie, I'm going to the 2D movie, unless there's some compelling reason. So that's a little off your question, but that's kind of how I feel about it. I know that just being down here at the studio and all the videotaping, that's been a big change. It's been a big change for how I look at things. I guess that's the thing, is that all these graphic art classes have changed the way I look at the world. So I might be driving down the street right now and I'll go, wow, look at that sky, and look at the contrast of the clouds to the blue to this. And then I'm suddenly trying to figure out how I'd recreate that in Photoshop, or how would I recreate it in Illustrator. So I think that this is like a training process. It's like a visual training process. I just did a little video that's really bad. we're going to put on YouTube anyway for one of the websites that I'm doing because we want to get the tie-in and the Google and that whole thing. But the interesting thing was it made me have a whole new appreciation for this old house because the little video is showing how you put together this fabric holder. And I made that comment, and the person that I worked with, Ed, said, well, what do you mean? And I couldn't really explain it because it's a visual thing and a sound quality thing, and it's something that I never, like 10 years ago, would have never even picked up on. And the only way I could tell him is he's kiteboard. I'd say, you know, it's kind of like when the wind changes, and you can feel the little tiny changes in the wind, and I'd be going, what changes? You know, it's just something that you become sensitive to and you become aware of. It's just a whole different way of looking at the world.
Well, maybe that will help. Well, the question I always ask people on the show is, why do you think art is important for people? Why do you think creativity is important?
I think it connects our primal brain to the world. It creates a feeling that a lot of times I'll look at something and I won't know exactly why it's creating an emotion in me. I just know that it does. And that's why I say it's your primal brain, not your frontal lobe or whatever we do our thinking with, because I really don't know what that is. So I think it connects us to the world in a really basic way.
Great. That's a good answer. It's funny because even the last show, Emmanuel, who was on, he said something, and it was different, but in a way had a similar kind of idea about connecting things. And so we don't have much time, but maybe quickly you could just tell me what's kind of in store for you, any projects, specific projects that you have coming up that you're working on.
Well, specifically, I'm going to design the next glass for the Brewfest. So that's on the boards, and I just got done, creating a poster with the Worldwide Wrestling for my friend Kai, who just, that's his thing. And a little plug for Costco, for $10, you can get a 20 by 30 poster done on really nice photo paper. So that is a lot of fun because it's, I took like 3,000 pictures at this last thing I took him to, and so I'm going through all and trying to, get them down, and so that's what I'm working on.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Susan. We could have five other shows, I'm sure, about this stuff. So, thank you for watching Art in the Digital World, and I'll see you next time.